Namaste from Bharat. I welcome you all. My name is Arush Joshi, a researcher at the Indic Researchers Forum. I will be your host for the inaugural session. Indic Researchers Forum is a security think tank focusing on issues pertaining to national security, defense, and geopolitics through a civilizational perspective. Today's online conference, Civil Society, the New Frontier of War, seeks to provide a platform for engaging pivotal stakeholders in comprehensive discourse on this important topic. The conference will promote constructive dialogue to address the challenges of fourth generation warfare. Through this effort, the conference aspires to fortify Bharat's security architecture by discussing and strategizing multifaceted approaches to counter this national security threat. With this, I would like to introduce the session chair for the inaugural session, Commodore Deshmukh. Commodore S.L. Deshmukh, Nausena Medal, retired, has served in the Indian Navy for 32 years. His educational qualifications include BE, MSc, PGDM. He holds qualification both in the marine and aviation fields. He served on board ships and aircraft carriers. He is a specialist on maintenance of fighter aircraft and anti-submarines warfare helicopters. He held many operational appointments on board ships and administrative appointments, including Principal Director at the Naval Headquarters, Commodore Superintendent Naval Aircraft Yard, Director Naval Institute of Aeronautical Technology, and Project Director of a major naval aviation project. He is an alumni of the Defense Services Staff College. Post-retirement from the Indian Navy, he worked with the Tata Group for 5 years and with Sun Group's Aerospace and Defense Vertical as Senior Vice President for 12 years. He is currently in Pune, guiding SMEs in the region to undertake projects under the Atmanirbhar Bharat policy in conjunction with the global OEMs. He is currently working with the Manipal Institute of Technology and the Manipal Academy for Higher Education as adjunct faculty. He has many articles published by the C3SI, DRAS, and EJSSS. C3SI, Pragna Center for Research, and KW Publishers have published his books titled Probable Sino-Russia Military Pact Implications for India and China's Game Plan in Ladakh, Imperatives for India. He is the life member of Aeronautical Society of India. Welcome, sir. Before I invite Deshmukh sir, I would request the audience to kindly turn off their mics. Deshmukh sir, the floor is all yours.
Thank you so much for your introduction. Dr. Prabhu, General Bakshi, Yashas, senior officers, ladies and gentlemen, very good morning. Indic Researchers Forum deserve a word of praise for organizing this webinar on a very sensitive, important, but not yet very well understood issue. I also would like to express my gratitude for Indic for giving this honor of chairing this session, which is being graced by very eminent speakers, including Dr. Prabhu. Civil society has now become the new frontier of war, as conventional wars have ceased to be effective tool for achieving political or military objectives. The conventional wars are also expensive, unaffordable, and do not guarantee the desired outcomes. On the other hand, the civil society can be subverted, suborned, divided, and manipulated to hurt the interests of a nation. When we are faced with the neighbors like China and Pakistan, the Western powers trying to keep India destabilized, ongoing misuse of the social media, and unfortunate gullibility of the common people, this issue assumes an alarming proportion. Such fears were also echoed by Dr. Ajit Doval, our Honorable NSA, while reviewing a passing out parade of 73 batch of IAS probationers. While there could be views and the counter views on the subject, the emerging threat of civil society being used as an instrument of war cannot be ignored. We are indeed fortunate to have Dr. Prabhu, Ambassador Sibal, and General Bakshi amongst us today to speak to us on this very complex but important topic. This phenomenon also has been termed by some analysis as a fourth generation warfare, which relates to the conflict where the state loses its monopoly on war and is fighting the non-state actors, such as terror groups or insurgents, which we are certainly experienced today. Just to recap, the first generation warfare refers to formulated battlefield war, second generation to artillery fire, third generation to the speed, surprise, and infiltration. Compared to this, the fourth generation warfare is much cheaper, can be waged facelessly, and has immense potential for achieving the desired results. What is the civil society is an important aspect which we need to understand before we delve into its pros and cons. The report of the World Economic Forum has stated that the NGOs, the labor leaders, the faith-based organizations, religious leaders, and other civil society representatives play a very critical and a diverse set of roles in societal development. The NGOs or the civil societies, as we term them, they are supposed to be a watchdog for the government and ensure that all policies are implemented and common man's interests are looked after. However, the times have now come that the NGOs and the civil societies, which are being funded by the foreign resources, have changed their role and they have assumed a role of a critic, wherein every policy, every initiative, every thinking of the government to ensure that India becomes a Atmanirbhar Bharat and is capable of becoming one of the superpowers. They criticize every aspect and every facet, which is not a good thing. This is what we need to watch for. The farmers' agitations, the agitations against CAA, opposition to UCC, these are all the indicators of the civil societies trying to subvert the progressive agenda of the government, which is towards the development of our nation. There is another facet for the civil societies. The ex-bureaucrats or the industrialists or ex-officers have started promoting the NGOs and they get funding from the foreign resources. The agenda of the civil societies is to collate the reports which are based on their colored vision and give such reports to the foreign governments or think tanks, whereby all biased reports against the country are propagated, putting the government and the Indian nation under pressure and ensuring that the developmental progress is thwarted so that India doesn't reach where it's supposed to reach. It is therefore important for us to understand what are the civil societies, what are their roles, and what they should and what they should not do. This is what is the subject of today's seminar, on which Dr. Prabhu, Ambassador Sibal, and General Bakshi will educate us. I am well aware Dr. Prabhu has got a very full agenda on his table today. So I will stop here my introductory remarks. And before I invite Dr. Prabhu for his comments, I have the honor of introducing Dr. Prabhu. Dr. Suresh Prabhakar Prabhu is a very respected politician and a diplomat who has held many key positions, such as the Minister of Civil Aviation, Railways, Commerce and Industry, among others. He has also served as India's Sherpa, the G7 and G20. He is a chartered accountant by profession and is a member of Institute of Chartered Accountants of India. He has held several government and semi-government positions that include the chairmanship of Maharashtra State Finance Commission, Saraswat Cooperative Bank, member of the Maharashtra Tourism Development Board, among others. He is part of the various global organizations and strategic dialogues, including Global Water Partnership, World Economic Forum, United Nations Development Programs, Asia Energy Forum, United Nations Committee of Biodiversity, and is also a member of the Board of Advisors of India International Movement to the United States. Dr. Prabhu has constantly featured in the list of top 5 ministers in India from 2014 to 2017 in terms of both performance and accessibility in the nationwide surveys conducted by various organizations. Currently, he is serving as a Chancellor of Rishi University. A very warm welcome, Dr. Prabhu. We are indeed fortunate to have you on this forum. Floor is yours, sir. Thank you so very much. So you may need to unmute, sir.
Fine. Okay. So thank you, Deshmukh Saab. Thank you, Arush, and thank you everybody else for organizing this event and also inviting me for this very important program. In a way, as Dr. Deshmukh pointed out earlier, it's a very unique program. Not many times we get an opportunity to talk on issues like this. And sometimes what is invisible is more dangerous than what is visible. So normally when you're fighting a war, you can see the sirens going around, you get into the bunkers, hide yourself. There is a bombardment happening, so you can see that there is a artillery going around, and therefore you can hear the voice of that. It's everything. But normally other wars which are fought are not at all making such noise. And as you said correctly, they're more effective, sometimes no cost or low cost, and therefore they need to be properly understood. So this is a very important issue, and I'm very glad that you organized it and invited me to address this program. I just want to catch a flight. That's why thank you for accommodating me to speak first, so I can do both, catch a flight as well as uh, probably talk to all of you. So number one, as I said, the new world as it is emerging today is completely different than the world that we have seen in the past several thousand years. Firstly, the state, the concept of state itself was born much, much later than the human beings were born. We were all the time moving around, nomadic. We were always never settle in one particular place. So obviously, if people are moving from one place to another, and the entire population is floating population, the concept that now we are derived saying that there are citizens and there's a floating population. So therefore now this particular idea of state itself came much later, post agriculture revolution. And then when the state was formed, much later, the evolution of state has taken place. The state itself has undergone a sea change in terms of its concept, content, as well as the kind of instrument the state must possess to exercise its rights and make sure that the sovereignty is actually what is part of the state's fundamental feature is also exercised. While doing all that, importantly, we now, at least now, we accept that there are three arms of state normally, which is legislature, executive, and judiciary, which are equally important to make sure that they balance each other, there are checks and balances, and therefore they exercise the right in a manner that citizens are ensuring that they will be protected properly. The states, as you correctly said, then actually because they have such sovereign power, they can have the authority to have their own military. They have the ability to collect taxes to finance these militaries. They have the ability to enforce the rights of the citizens which they're supposed to have as an instrument of all the citizens, giving them those rights through either democratic process or sometimes in countries which don't have democracies, they exercise the right thing that first it's come from divinity or it has come because of their own commitment to an ideology. But whatever it is. Now, this particular concept of state and exercising this through these three various arms of state itself is now in these modern times is undergoing some stress for two reasons. One, the civil society, which is actually a non-state actor. Civil society by definition is not part of the state. But at the same time, the civil society, non-state actors in any modern society have become very, very strong, very powerful, very knowledgeable. They have their own powers. For example, just imagine some of the top technology companies of the world are having their own top lines and their market caps, which are more than 95% of the country's GDPs. Not many countries actually, if you look at G20, which is the 20 countries of the top 20 economies of the world, those for 21st country or downwards, in another 170, 180 countries, none of the countries will have that GDP equivalent to any of these technology companies' top line or market cap. What does it mean? That is states which are now in these economies. Also, there are states, the smaller economies, who are not G20 economies, non G20 economies. So these states don't have the economic power that some of these companies have got. And that shows that new emergence of power centers have happened over a period of time. And this also as a civil society organization because they're non-state actors. Again, there are some organizations which have become so powerful because of their ability to influence public opinion, and that's media. So what has happened is, in the course of last several decades, this new emergence of power center is now putting some stress on the state itself. The state was thinking that we can exercise, all right, we can do this. But today, these non-state actors have become very powerful, effective, and also acceptable. So that's a very big challenging issue that we have to see. At the same time, we have to look at its implications on our lives. Now, one is, as I said, we always accepted that these three arms of state are important. But then we also accepted the fourth state is also important. If you don't have media, how can the expression of voice of the common citizens will happen? But then even then we are accepting that. And while there was some hesitancy on the part of several states in the world to accept that as another player with whom they can share some power. And while that was happening, over a period of time, in the particularly last few decades, and particularly in the last decade, the social media has become very powerful. And now social media has now provided a new tool, a new power, which can be excelled by every citizen. So earlier you had to write to a newspaper, letter to editor. And if they are willing to publish it, that's the only way you could express yourself through the media. Of course, there were other ways of expression of your own ideas. You could go to judiciary, file a habeas corpus if you are arrested wrongly. You can make writ petitions to the court and say that my fundamental right is affected, so I must have. But that was one. You could go to a legislator whom you are elected and make a representation. You can go to the executive and make a representation. That was always there. But non-state actors through whom you could express your face was this media, the traditional media. And now this new emergence of social media is another very important aspect, which is non-state actors playing a big role. Now, when you say non-state actors, normally they have some ability and they work in tandem in some way. Now, the social media is a completely new animal. Every person is holding not a pen anymore in his hand, but just has a smartphone or any other gadget in his hand, can just keep on expressing himself or herself, and that becomes a new expression way that has been available. So today, we have to look at this whole scenario, which has emerged as a new challenge to the traditional structures and systems which has been prevailing in this world for a while. And these so-called modern democracies, therefore, will have to deal with it in a very different way. Now, coming to this today's very important issue. Wars are not only fought, as we know, during this post-industrial evolution, as they're saying, yes, there are different kind of a structured wars. But wars have always been fought. Even when the state was not created, state was not assumed the role of a state as it's known today, the people are fighting for territories, sometimes fighting for getting a woman from other tribe into my fold. Genghis Khan, actually, very interestingly, in fact, his wife was stolen, and therefore he went and he was nobody. So he just went to fight with a neighboring tribe who had taken his wife, and that's how the sense came in. And then he, of course, created one of the world's biggest empire. This was Genghis Khan's empire. But what I'm saying is, therefore, the wars have been fought for many reasons, even before the states were created. But post-states are created, post-industrial evolution, this so-called military-industry complex, as particularly in the US, they are very popularly and, of course, notoriously called And therefore, this particular concept is war is not a new phenomena. It's always been there, and now, of course, it has assumed a new role. And in this context today, we have to see how do you make now this new war, which is fought on the screen, on the gadget, and sometimes not even seen because it is indoctrination. The idea can be planted in a mind, and therefore the mind gets completely corrupted or sometimes influenced, if not corrupted. And that particular influence can be more powerful than the territory that you acquire through the war or the kind of influence that you can exercise by having a stronger military. And that is one new challenge that we are all to face. And as you correctly said, we are surrounded by such vicious neighbors and such challenging times that we are going through. And not only the neighborhood is the only way we should look at this war, which is now what we are talking about, a war through civil society. This can be fought without having a border closer to your place. The Americans have been saying that there has been an election interference by the Russians in their elections. Now the Europeans are saying, yes, this is possible, that there is now, in fact, the 2024 election, which will happen in US in the next 6 months. They are saying Chinese are actually influencing and interfering the election. So just imagine where is China, where is Russia, and where is United States. So nothing called neighborhood anymore when you look at such challenges that we really talk about. But this is a new emerging threat coming not from known state actors, but from others who are not traditionally known as having the right to possess that power. They don't have it either given by the constitution, given by any law, or given by any other structured system, but they exercise a much wider power. And this is what we should be really concerned about. Now, therefore, we have to really, based on this, as I said, I have to clarify, but this is important issue, and I'm sure we'll deliberate on it. I just want to flag off one point, Deshmukh Saab, if you permit me, and that is that when we say that all NGOs are not good, is something which we have to distinguish between the two. Because, if you look at India, or look at our context, many public good providers are NGOs. In rural areas, a lot of good work that happens in education, in healthcare, in rural development, even leprosy program. In fact, Baba Amte is a good example who has been running Anandvan program in Maharashtra. Or actually, there are many, many thousands of people. In fact, I'm very happy that our Prime Minister is now honoring such people who are who is not known at all. And now they are getting Padma Shri, Padma Bhushan, etc. for the good work that they're doing. Now, what are they? Are they not non-state actors? They are individuals. Sometimes they may be organized and they may be working and they may be doing something which is actually speaking the duty of a state to perform that. But because the state is not able to do as much as it is required, these are the people or the organizations who are providing it. Therefore, we should try to very clearly distinguish between NGOs are necessary, important. When we say RSS is the largest NGO of the world, it's a cultural organization. So just imagine. And because of RSS, thousands, tens of thousands of good organizations are working on the ground and they're doing phenomenal work. I mean, I have personal experience of doing that. And therefore, I'm saying we should try to distinguish between non-state actors when we say some are good, some are not so good. We should be able to distinguish them. So we cannot generalize, but also must have the ability to find out and distinguish between the good and the bad. And therefore, this again is a very important challenge. Now, who will do this? This is another important issue. I'm happy Doval Saab, Ajit Doval Saab has flagged up this very, very important issue. And of course, we should be all very proud that Doval Saab is the National Security Advisor. I know him for years, and I'm very happy that he has really kept us secured, not only just last one decade, but even before, while working in various other capacities. So why he has flagged off a very important issue. So therefore, when I'm saying that all NGOs are not bad, then who will decide who is a good NGO and a bad NGO? We must also think about this forum like this, some mechanism to actually make this distinction very properly and also in a very objective manner. Otherwise, we'll actually allow the good to die with small little bad that has surfaced. And therefore, we should not let that happen. But we must work very carefully about the new threat that has emerged. And I am sure this is a very, very important issue. Very, very subtly, somebody can actually come and plant these ideas. And as you have correctly said, many times these foreign funded NGOs have caused a tremendous harm and also irreparable damage to our functioning of the society, as well as putting some wrong ideas in the mind of the people, which is still worse than actually the tangible damage they can cause. And therefore, we must be conscious and we must be working on this. But as I said, while working consciously, also must be cautious about making sure that we do not allow the good NGOs to suffer because of these things. So thank you very much. And I am very, very sure that this challenging time that we are all in, wherein the military will of course protect our borders, but non-uniform soldiers who operate very subtly, very discreetly, without even being noticed and without even being known as the soldiers, they are causing and probably likely to cause even more damage as we go along. So we must work on all these. So thank you very much for first inviting me, secondly allowing me to speak first, and also give a benefit from this audience experience, which of course I will get afterwards, and also I will benefit from it. Thank you very much. I really appreciate this.
Thank you very much, sir. In a very short time, you have given us a broad canvas. The three important points of which I have taken note of. First of all, we should be very, very cautious to distinguish between the good and the bad of the NGOs. A very pertinent one for us, sir. And related to that, when you have pointed out that sometimes it is the invisible which is far more important for us to take note of and then fight it out. The bad which comes out on that invisible is the most important point one need to note and take care of. So the phenomena today, what happens? Today, if we have some unorganized or organized demonstrations or something, and if some action is taken by the police, we are branded as the people who are repressing the voice of the people. When the same repression happens in the foreign universities, that seems to be the rule of law. And these ideas are propagated in our society, saying that we are using the draconian laws to suppress the voice of common people. This is the best example how the social media is being used to paint a very bleak picture for India as a democratic country. And it's very dangerous as our democracy, our judiciary, our political setup also is being damaged by this, by the false propaganda. So as you put it rightly, we have to really separate the chaff from the grain and ensure that the chaff does not pollute the atmosphere in India and does not stop us from our developmental agenda. Once again, thank you so very much, sir, for being on the forum despite your very busy schedule. And we will keep note of it and send you the proceedings of this, sir, certainly. Thank you so much, sir.
Be in
Have a
touch.
very safe
Thank you very
flight,
much.
sir.
Really
Have a
appreciate
good day.
it. Thank you.
Good day, sir. Arush, is Ambassador Sibal on the forum?
Yes, sir. He has joined.
Okay. Very good morning, Ambassador, sir. Welcome. Just 1 minute, please. We just had the honor of listening to Dr. Prabhu, where he illustrated the views on the civil society and the problems what we could face. It's my absolutely honor and pleasure to welcome Ambassador Kanwal Sibal to our forum. Sibal, sir, with his over 40 years of experience in the diplomacy, is a former foreign secretary to the government of India. He has been ambassador to Turkey, Egypt, France, and Russia. He was member of India's National Security Advisory Board from 2008 to 2010. He is on the board of the New York-based East-West Institute and the member of the Executive Council of the Vivekananda International Foundation. He was president of Association of Indian Diplomats in 2011. He has written more than 700 op-eds and other articles for major national journals and the periodicals on international affairs. He was made a Grand Officer of the Order of national merit by the French president in 2004. In 2017, he received the Padma Shri Award from the President of India. He has been decorated by Russian Foreign Minister on behalf of the Russian Foreign Ministry for contribution to the international cooperation. Currently, he is serving as the Chancellor of Jawaharlal Nehru University. Sir, a very warm welcome. And sir, we all understand the issue of civil society and the governmental developmental programs do clash with each other, and it's a very important facet. We will be more than honored to listen to you, sir, and get the recommendation from you to tackle this menace which is emanating in our country. Thank you so much, sir. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. I think the subject you've chosen for this conversation is very important. Civil society, the new frontier of war. Now, I think we need to understand, which I think all of us do, because the role of civil society in democracies has now become a matter of debate and concern. I've always been a little doubtful about the concept of civil society in democracies. After all, democracy is for the people, by the people, or whatever else. And you have elections, people are constantly consulted. Elections can be pretty tough. There is an independent judiciary, there is a free press. There are political parties, which means several political parties, which means that you have a political choice. So you have many platforms on which you can express your thinking and views, and at election time, you make your political choice. So why do we then talk about civil society in a democracy? Essentially, it is a concept that comes from the West, from the United States in particular, as also Europe. Now, is it because many believe that now there is a gap between the public and governance in these countries? In other words, there is a feeling that the government elected democratically does not truly represent the voice of the people. So there is a bit of a crisis in democracy, in Western democracies. And the civil society, therefore, has organized itself to make the government more aware and influence its policies in the directions they want. Of course, this is abused a great deal, even in the West, because the civil society is used even internally in the government, like the United States, by the intelligence agencies to promote a certain line of thinking. On the other hand, the civil society can play a positive role too, because at the end of the day, the government machinery is not so vast, and everybody in the government is not so well informed and has the time to look deeply into various governance issues, and therefore there can be well-meaning civil society groups, NGOs, who can study the subjects in depth, make recommendations. It's up to the government to accept them or not. On environmental issues, climate change issues, women-related issues, some ground level work in terms of alleviating poverty, in terms of education, in terms of creating better awareness of in the people at large about their needs and how they can address them and approach the government in a democratic manner to address their problems. Now, India has the highest number of NGOs in the world. On the other hand, and this is where India's concerns come in, so long as we have civil society organizations, which are grassroots organizations, which don't have a visible anti-government revolutionary kind of an agenda, like the Maoists or the certain leftist groups which believe in anarchy, or who want to promote religious violence, things like that. But if the civil society groups function normally as positive elements in a society in terms of creating greater awareness of issues and influencing government policies in a constructive manner, that's one aspect. But from our point of view, many of these NGOs, very important ones, significant ones, capable of influencing policy, are financed externally. I've always asked myself, why is it that the government accepts foreign funding of NGOs, of civil society groups? We have experience of this. We know what the agenda of organizations like the Ford Foundation or the Rockefeller Foundation or the Open Society or Omidyar Foundation, and a whole host of organizations which are involved in funding civil society groups in India in order to advance their agenda. Why do they want to do that? I mean, what is their interest in financing NGOs in India? Now, what part of the answer is that this is one way of creating pressure on the government, as you mentioned, interfering in their development plans. That we've seen that the kind of protests that occurred at Kudankulam, they were clearly manipulated from outside. One of the reasons is that they want to have a handle to be able to influence the government on issues in which they have interest. Or for that matter, have a handle on the government in order to keep the government on the defensive constantly, create pressure points, and make the government more amenable to their suggestions and advice and everything else. Today, these countries cannot occupy territory. The days of colonialism are over. The physical occupation is not possible, but mental occupation is possible. And the purpose of civil society is to control the thinking and analysis that go on in terms of understanding issues. So it is a way for the West to retain hegemony and control. It's much easier in democratic societies. I mean, they've done it elsewhere, and I'll come to that. Even in closed societies, they have done it. But in open societies like India, especially with the English language that people in India are speaking and have access to, it's very easy then to penetrate the Indian society. Whatever is written there, whatever documentation comes from there is read. If it came in Chinese or Russian, they won't be able to make the same impact on the ground. But when it comes in English, very easy. And then on the internet and everything else, you access materials that come from there because you know the English language. You can easily access all this and then feel enriched with ideas, with concepts. Because we are, as a country, we have been quite dissociated with our own past and our own concepts and everything else. So we very easily imbibe the concepts that come from others. One of the dangers that I see, and we must be very conscious of this, and unfortunately, our Supreme Court seems to be a prey to this, is this wokeism business. This whole wretched wokeism business, which is a huge problem in the education system, even in the West, even in Europe. I remember a couple of years ago, French President Macron, by speaking somewhere, he made a statement that I have instructed the French education minister to look at what's happening in the universities because many of these ideas that are coming from the West about minorities, about gender stuff, uh, about questioning history, questioning the heroes of the past and everything else, is highly disruptive, and it's not in consonance with French culture. Now, even if a country like France feels threatened by these wokist ideas, you can imagine the danger that we are in. And here I'd like to say that, to my mind, government has to be very careful in its new education policy. It is allowing Western universities to come and set up shop here. I have absolutely no problem if technology related institutes are set up here. Absolutely no problem. But liberal arts, no. That is the source where they can control the thinking of your youngsters, of your university students and everything else. You've seen what's happening in the American universities and now in European universities. It can happen in India too, because the instruments, the toolkits are the same, and the external flow of external influences are the same, and children tend to be idealistic and everything else, so they can be excited by what might look like a very positive agenda, but in fact would be inherently quite destructive. The other purpose of the West funding these organizations is to dilute the government, control of the government over policy, and using the civil society to shape policy. We see this in international organizations. Earlier on, it was always government to government level negotiations. Now there's this concept of stakeholders. So the civil society comes in large numbers, so that they can then influence decisions which have a global impact, and force you to accept things which as a nation you may not be very comfortable with, because all these NGOs all over the world are part of the official multilateral discussions. So this is one way in which the West again has used the civil society as an instrument to advance their global agenda. And then they have organizations like Freedom House, which, as you know, very close links with the CIA, and this VDEM from Sweden, or Amnesty International, or Human Rights Watch, or this US Commission on International Religious Freedoms, and organizations like that. They again are the source of influencing the internal situation in countries like India. And you've seen the kind of campaign that is being conducted against India for a long time, and more particularly recently, including during election time. Now, if we were impervious to this, or largely if we had some kind of a barrier to this, I can understand. But it's not the case. We have elements in India actually who are hands in glove with these organizations and amplify whatever they say. The smallest criticism of India, the smallest statement made by the State Department becomes news in our papers. Our papers will give front page coverage to any criticism that is made of India, instead of objecting to this or giving counter argument, which they don't. They project it as if it's the white man has spoken, and therefore it must be true. This is another handle that these people have. And then there is the press, whether it is the New York Times, Washington Post, or the Economist, or Financial Times, or the Wall Street Journal, or Le Monde. Just look at what they write about India and the issues that they pick up, and the issues, and it is destructive without limit. And sometimes I ask myself, what is the concept these people have of their role as journalists? It's not that they need to be the spokesman of the government of India, but they need to be at least minimally objective. But they're absolutely not. And therefore they project constantly a negative view of India, of backsliding of democracy, of minority persecution, of lynching, of capture of institutions, or curbs on the judiciary, curbs on the press, and everything else. This is the constant refrain. And it does damage to India. Let's not be oblivious to this. It does do damage to India, because an ordinary person, enlightened person who's aware of the international situation, and I've seen this in my experience, those who don't specialize in India, let's say, they just read this stuff and they form a view. And since most of the time it's the Indians who are writing this stuff, so I mean, therefore, I suppose they think that, well, if this is being said, there must be some truth in this, and it's very difficult for the government to counter this. Same is true of the TV channels. The France 24 that I occasionally see, just to see what the negative twist they give to India news, or this German Deutsche Welle or whatever. The European, mind you, we don't pay too much attention to the European press. It's more focused on the US and UK press. But the European press follows the same line. Nothing positive about India largely. Then, there is this whole discourse of democracy, values, and human rights at the official level in the West. That is also a way to influence the civil society here, because the civil society is receptive to any criticism that comes from the West about democracy backsliding. And of course, you want to measure up to the Western values, and you don't want to be seen as a violator of human rights. And there are issues in India which you can always play up, whether it's in Jammu and Kashmir or caste issues or minority issues. You can always, in our fractured society, raise these issues, and are being raised, and they are being raised. The thing is that the civil society here, with the encouragement of the West, gets more oxygen to raise these issues. Now, I was talking of wokeism. I was very surprised at the recent judgment of the Supreme Court. In this case of a 14-year-old girl who was raped, and there was this abortion case, where 42 times they referred to her as a pregnant person. And the Supreme Court Chief Justice made the argument that there can be cases of transgender men or non-binaries also becoming pregnant, and therefore we want to have neutral language. Now, what kind of nonsense is this? Utter nonsense. And here it's not a question of civil society being, or maybe it is. Maybe the Supreme Court is sensitive to these kind of debates in civil society and want to be seen in tune with these debates. And this shows the direction in which we can go if we are not careful. Now, finally, FCRA restrictions. No, let me, before that, talk about social media also, because apart from everything else that I've mentioned, social media is a very powerful instrument for conditioning thinking. Now, in India, people on social media, we are the biggest users of American social media. And when we remember, our population is 1.4 billion. And if 80-90% or 700-800 million, 900 million have access to the internet and smartphones, so you can imagine the kind of conditioning that can be done. And the government is not in a position to control this. Yes, in very exceptional cases, they ask these people to put down certain posts and this and that and that, but that's a long process. And that process itself is problematic, because then we are criticized for curbing freedom of speech. The whole freedom of speech debate then enters into this. And the government, therefore, has to be very careful in not being seen to be curbing speech, because the youngsters are now very sensitive to this, and they want to have access to this media. And even more than the written press and television and everything else, the social media is a huge source of influencing the younger minds of the people. The other thing I want to mention is what we have seen, and we have to be careful about this, what the United States in particular, and with the help of Europe, but the United States in particular has done in terms of regime changes. Now, in Ukraine, there has been a huge, long-standing project of regime change, this color revolution. In Georgia, this happened. The whole Arab Spring, it was Freedom House and the Endowment, National Endowment of Democracy of the United States and others were deeply involved in this. And whereas, of course, in a functioning democracy like ours with a popular leader and the progress that we are seeing on the ground, it is not possible to manipulate the Indian electoral system to this extent or the Indian public to this extent. But nevertheless, the concerted campaign that we've seen during this election points in this direction. That even if we can't dislodge Modi, let's see if he can somehow help in reducing his majority so that he becomes more manageable and India becomes more manageable. And India doesn't have that kind of liberty of maneuver, which a huge Modi victory would give India. So I was coming to this FCRA restrictions. That itself has become a bit of an issue. I'm personally very glad that the government has taken decision to withdraw the license of hundreds of organizations, which itself shows that there were hundreds of organizations which were doing work at the behest of foreign interests. And I was amazed that 80% of the funding of CPR, which is now being projected as a major Indian civil society organization or whatever, 80% of the funding was coming from outside, foreign. Why? And how come CPR acquired such great influence with foreign funding? And why did they need foreign funding? If they were doing such good work, they should have been funded from inside. I have been reading for a long time Rajiv Malhotra's books about breaking India and snakes in the Ganga, and he brings out very well the dangers that lie ahead. So, how should I conclude? I'll conclude by saying a few things. One, that this FCRA business, the licensing under that has to be controlled more and more. We shouldn't bother about what the West feels. The Americans I've served there, I know how utterly sensitive they are on issues of foreign funding. And anybody who receives money from abroad has to be declared a foreign agent, which then means that a whole set of different rules apply to that organization. We've not gone that far, but we have to be very careful because we have a lot of social fractures in our country, and they can be exploited, and it'll take time for us to resolve those issues. We must build up our own social media. Chinese have done that, but the Chinese system allows it. In our case, I think we have now too much, our foot is too much deep into the Western social media system to be able to develop an alternative one. But nevertheless, we should move in that direction, and we should have our national laws and robustly apply them, and not accept the fact that since they are controlled from outside, that sovereignty on these issues lies with them and not with us. It may be an unpopular thing, but I hope with Modi's big success, we will have the self-confidence to go down the road. We should not allow liberal arts colleges of the West to install themselves here and condition the mind of our youngsters, and this is going to be a big problem for us in the future. And we should also, it's a bold thing, I think we should deal more robustly with the foreign press, the correspondents in India, who are systematically creating misperceptions about India with their narratives, including this Washington Post latest venture into the Panun affair, where they were actually trying to contact our former raw officers and also track this Vikram Yadav, which is a clear interference in our internal affairs. But beyond that, it is a kind of spy work on behalf of intelligence agencies. It merited him to be expelled. Of course, we won't do that. But the point is, there has to be. Uh, Now, when this Australian journalist was, well, actually, she was given the visa at the last minute, but the entire foreign correspondent press corps signed a petition on a small issue like this, where the facts were not against the government, but they did it. So they are getting too big for their feet. Sorry for the language, but I think something needs to be done to control them. Anyway, it's not easy what I'm saying, because at the end of the day, we also want to maintain our image of a democracy. And we use the language of democracy, the fact we're the largest democracy in the world, and that we share the same values. We use this as a diplomatic tool in our relations with the West. And we think it's an argument which would help us economically too. So we are caught between two storms: how to keep projecting ourselves as an open liberal democracy and also protect ourselves because there are a lot of enemies within and without. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, sir. It has been really enlightening elucidation that we have seen some important points emerging. The basic questions which emerged from the thoughts which you have seeded in our minds. First of all, sir, as you very rightly pointed out, the civil society concept originated from the Western, which have now been rather implanted in Asian environment.
Yes.
Now, the first question which must come to the mind, that the civil society concept which originated based on the problems and the issues which are embedded in the Western society, can we just pick them up from there and start implanting them into Asia without understanding the diversity of the cultures, diversity of the religions, etc. in our religion? Therefore, sir, as you put it very rightly, we need to be very, very concise when we allow these NGOs to come in India, get the foreign funding, and start propagating the issues based on the color, vision, what they have. In my opinion, sir, practically the foreign media should have no right to start cribbing about UCC or CAA or anything else, because these are the internal issues what they belong to us, and we should be the rightfully owners of handling these issues. Similar, sir, what is disturbing that when somebody is arrested and the people from outside are telling us that so and so person should be treated judicially and all that, are they trying to cast aspersions on the judiciary of this country? And is the media in our own country not going to protest against that? It's a very, very disturbing thing, as you put it very rightly, sir. So the two aspects which are related to this, first of all, then, should we allow the media in India, including newspapers or televisions, to be majoritarily owned by the foreign powers through the foreign funding so that they become more amenable? And secondly, shall we allow the foreign universities to come to India, start indoctrinating our own people at the cost of destabilizing our internal structures, what we have? Because our idea of education goes to the thousands of years back. We are not the by rote educationist people. We follow the Gurukul system. So once again, the Western education system trying to be imposed on India could be a very big threat, as you have put very rightly, sir. So those are the issues we really will have to debate and come up with some important recommendations to be implemented. And last but not least, you really put out, there are certain organizations. Why do they need the foreign funding? If they are doing a good work in India, we ourselves will find a way of funding them. And there are organizations which are doing a good work. So, sir, these are the issues which you have flagged. We are very grateful to you. And it was really honor and pleasure to listen to you, sir, because what you said comes from the vast experience what you hold. We all are grateful to you, sir. Thank you so very much, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Have a good day, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good afternoon, General, sir. It's honor and pleasure for me. Just 1 minute, sir. General Bakshi, welcome to the forum. I have had a pleasure of listening to you on many occasions, and every time I have been enlightened on the facets which probably I was not even aware of sometimes. It's honor and pleasure to welcome you to this particular forum to speak to us on the aspects of the civil society. Ladies and gentlemen, Major General Dr. G.D. Bakshi, Sena Medal, Vishrasasya Medal, is a combat veteran of many skirmishes on the line of control and the counter-terrorist operations in Jammu and Kashmir and Punjab. He had commanded his battalion in active operations Kargil and was awarded Vishesh Seva Medal. Later, he in Kashmir and was awarded Sena Medal. He subsequently commanded the Romeo Force during intensive counter-terrorist operation in Rajouri Poonch district of Jammu and Kashmir. He has served in highly prestigious Directorate of Military Operations during Op Pawan and Op Vijay. I understand the importance of both these operations because I had the honor of participating in this while I was in Indian Navy. He is a prolific writer on the matters military and non-military and has published 40 books and over 200 papers in many prestigious research journals. He served as Deputy Director, Research at the Vivekananda International Foundation. He subsequently took over as the Chief Editor of the Defense Security Alert magazine. He is currently editor of the Indian Military Review. Sir, it's indeed a pleasure to have you on this particular forum to enlighten us on the aspects of the civil society and what we must and what must we shouldn't do. We are eagerly waiting for your comments and suggestions to us, sir. Thank you so much. Floor is yours, sir. So you may kindly unmute, sir.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
All right. So at the outset, let me thank the organizers for this very wonderful seminar, very timely seminar, very, very pertinent seminar on the threats that we face that come to us through insidiously through our civil society. I had the pleasure of listening to Ambassador Sibal. It is always indeed education to listen to his erudition, scholarship, and his very practical views born out of long service and experience. Now, I would like at the outset to point out that the large countries like Russia, like China, like India, they are subject to forces of entropy from within. And most of the time, these large states have collapsed from internal forces rather than external aggression. For example, the Soviet Union had beaten, it was invaded by Nazi Germany. The German tanks of the Wehrmacht had reached the gates of Moscow, and then they were rolled back from Moscow back to Berlin. They could not destroy Russia militarily. But the simple fact is that in 1990-91, the Soviet Union, the erstwhile Soviet Union, collapsed without a single shot being fired. The bulk of the reason for this collapse was engineered economic collapse, but also an attack, societal attack on the institutions of the Soviet Union, on the people, on molding their shapes, shaping their attitudes, opinions, psychological, makeup, etc., to create such a massive change without a shot being fired. The ambassador very rightly spoke of all these colored revolutions that have been taking place through civil society, that have been causing regime change without firing a shot, without putting boots on the ground. And all this is being done by very effective use of the social media, psychological warfare, cyber warfare, information warfare, a whole host of toolkits to destabilize, to create problems, and to even overthrow regimes. very, very legally elected regimes. Let's go back to the Maidan revolution in the Ukraine, where the entire problem started in 2008. You see, Yanukovych is very, legally elected government is overthrown by a Maidan coup, by just creating mobs that head to Kyiv. Mobs in Odessa that burn the Russians in there, don't let them come out. And those that come, jump out are murdered. You create rage of such a sort. You revive, the Nazi impulses in Ukraine. And let me give you a little bit of a background to that. When Germany, Adolf Hitler had attacked the Soviet Union, he tried to create insurgencies to destabilize the target society. Reinhard Gehlen, Major General Reinhard Gehlen of the Abwehr, he contacted the Ukrainian, insurgents, the Ukrainian pro-Nazis, and he used them to carry out pogroms against Jews, against Russians. He tried to create a breakaway movement. And after the war, the OSS, Office of Strategic Studies, and subsequently the CIA, they contacted Reinhard Gehlen and the Abwehr's entire intelligence network in the Soviet Union, and they took it over. And a lot of these, Bandera, etc., go back to that era. And they were picked up and they brought center stage to, the Ukrainians and the Slavs are cousins. I mean, they are closely knit, closely related society. In fact, Ukraine was the mother of the Orthodox Russian church, the Russian Slavic culture, etc. They had so many commonalities, and today they are the bitterest of enemies. How has it happened? It has happened through civil society. It has happened through the social media. It has happened through cyber warfare, information warfare, psychological warfare operations to destabilize a society, to weaken a society, to overthrow legally elected governments. Violet Revolution, Spring Revolution, Arab Spring, etc., etc. The examples are one too many, where just by a where just by a texting revolution, messages that are texted to, start a fire, to start social unrest, to, like the flash mob dance, you can create by texting. You can also create a flash mob of people who will burn down government buildings, who will overthrow a legally elected government. And let me tell you, this toolkit is in practice right now, even as we speak during our elections. So, a lot of states can be overthrown just by influencing civil society, using the media, the electronic media, the mass media, and infiltrating that through people who have been either purchased, whose loyalties have been bought over, or who are otherwise ideologically influenced to peddle agendas of foreign governments. They can be major sources of destabilization. But the most major source is social media. Its reach is tremendous. You may not watch the television. You may switch it off if you don't want to hear a particular viewpoint. But social media is so insidious. It gets to your home, it gets to your mobile, it gets to your laptop, it gets to your mainframe, whatever, and it is able to influence attitudes, opinions, outlooks, and create mayhem in that society. We as a society in India are particularly vulnerable. Diversity, which is in one way our strength, is also our major weakness. We don't have ethnic coherence. We don't have coherence of language or kind of a homogeneity which makes the society more proof to foreign penetration, etc. We have so many fault lines. And for the last, I would say, 400 years of Muslim invasions and rule from Uzbekistan, Afghanistan, Turkic sultans, Mughals, Mongols, have you, and then 2 centuries of British rule. The one that did the most damage to us was the British rule, because very scientifically they set about trying to identify our various fault lines. And the fault lines of creed, of caste, of language, of religion, of ethnicity, of race, everything was exploited to divide and rule this country. And to divide it in such a way that even 75 years after independence, we have not been able to bridge those fault lines created between castes. And I shall be talking of that in the evening session in far greater detail. But let me just make a brief and passing mention. Fault lines created by exploiting caste divisions, and we had Herbert, Risley, the caste commissioner of India, the census commissioner of India, who headed the Royal Anthropological Society and was a very powerful agent in trying to do social engineering in India. He created the caste fault lines, which are still the cause of almost disruption. He did a series of caste-based census, with the help of which he socially re-engineered Indian society to freeze caste fault lines forever and ever. Jati and Varna were fluid, and they were made into deep fissures and fault lines, which instead of papering over, instead of doing away with, we have deepened. We have deepened to an extent that is dangerous. And you are seeing it play out in this election again. There is talk of caste-based censuses. Herbert Hope Risley, Sir Herbert Hope Risley used that to weaken our society, make it amenable to penetration and control by foreign powers. Right? Now, once again, those narratives are being taken out to create bitter north-south divides. There was the British Bishop Caldwell who started this Dravidian Aryan nonsense. After all, when you do the genetic profiling, Indian north and south of the Vindhyas, there is no difference in the genetic makeup. They are the same people. It's just that if I go and stay in Madras, I will have a greater tan than if I stay somewhere up north. But that has been used to create such bitter divides. People are asking for secession. On the basis of that, Afro-Dalit identities are being created and built. And I totally agree with Ambassador Kanwal Sibal when he says, why the hell do we have to go and study social sciences in Harvard and other universities in the United States? We should go there only for STEM. STEM, science, technology, engineering, maths. Yes, you may have things to learn there. Why should Indian history be written in Harvard? Does Harvard write the history of Russia, France, China? No, they don't. We are the only people who have outsourced our history to Harvard. Initially, it was Oxford and Cambridge. Now it is Harvard telling us who we are. The Aryans came from outside. Hinduism is a foreign implant in India. The Vedas came from outside. The Aryans are aliens. These were colonial narratives built to justify colonial rule over India. Right? And because of these narratives, they were able to rule us for 200 years. And Herbert Hope Risley had said, when he did the caste census, first caste-based census in 1872, that as long as there is caste, there will be no India. I'm sorry, our pygmy politicians have kept caste relevant and alive when it had no business to be. No business to be still kicking and alive. When a society industrializes, when a society urbanizes, what is the relevance of caste? Can I sit in a metro and ask my the person sitting next to me, what is your caste, what is your this thing. If he slaps me in the face, he will be fully justified. So with industrialization, with urbanization, caste should have become irrelevant and finished, atrophied, died out, become an anachronism that it has been for hundreds of years now. But it is being kept alive. The caste cleavages are being deepened because of economic incentives, job reservations, reservations in educational institutions. Merit is being pushed out to the United States. India as a society is being destroyed from within by these termites. You see, you can destroy a society without firing a shot. Like the Soviet Union was splintered into 15 states. Those were also the first colored revolution, really. And there have been so many of these colored revolutions which have overthrown governments left, right, and center in Eastern Europe, in Middle East, etc., etc. And it is being attempted against us. Rajiv Malhotra was so very prescient when he wrote his first book on breaking India. And he warned us against these breaking India forces, institution. George Soros has, put up $1 billion to get rid of Modi in these elections. And if you subtly watch the content of the social media, you'll find a whole lot of, narrative building being done. As we speak, it is on. Just analyze the content in the social media and you will see which messages on Twitter they are posted in the morning. By the evening, they have got 550,000 views. You and I post, we are lucky if we get 2,000, 3,000, and we are delighted if we cross 10,000. There are views of a particular tenor posted in the morning. By the evening, they have 550,000 views, 6 lakh, 7 lakh, 8 lakh, 10 lakh views. How? Why? You see, there is something very serious afoot. And if we don't wake up to it, we will be inviting disaster. Yes, foreign academia is setting shop here. It's very good. Please confine them to STEM. Science, technology, engineering, maths. That's all that we need to be updated with. Do we have to learn about caste from Harvard? Languages, Indian cultural more than tradition, Indian history has to be manufactured in Harvard. We have outsourced our history. We have outsourced our social sciences to the West. Now they tell us who we are, what is our identity, whether you are Aryans, whether you are Dravidian. It's all imposed narratives, imposed views. And if you don't have a narrative of your own, you will soon become a part of somebody else's narrative. We are an ancient civilization. Radiocarbon dating dates Virana at 9,500 years. From before present. You see, we are great antiquity, amazing cultural continuity. But that is now under assault, under threat by the breaking India forces. And in Snakes in the Ganga, Rajiv Malhotra has brought us up to date, up to speed on how startups are being used to destabilize India. Not just NGOs, startups. They hire a certain set of people. They make them captive audiences in particular organization. There is a Iranian origin gentleman, very, very active in India if you read Snakes in the Ganga. And he is doing it not through NGOs. Because now we have become quite wise to NGOs. We are trying to control their funding. And I totally agree. Why should our NGOs have to be funded from United States? If they are so good, they are doing such a good job. I'm sure we have very big business houses, Reliance, Ambani's, Adani's, etc., who can fund these. Mahindras, there is no dearth of very vibrant private sector organizations who can fund these. But yet they must get funding from abroad. And then they want to agitate against the where the thorium-based sands are, where the Konakalam project is coming up. They want to hit our nuclear power sector. You see, and in the bargain also hit our nuclear capabilities, military. So there is a lot that is going on which is very unsavory, which is designed to break us up, which is designed to weaken us up. Yes, we are becoming a major power. From the 10th largest economy, we are today the 5th largest economy. We are heading to be the 3rd largest. That is precisely why you are you are a space power of consequence, emerging military power of major consequence. That is why you will be targeted. The clash of civilizations is very much on. It never got over. We better read Samuel Huntington again. You are an emerging civilization. You will be put down. You will be broken up, and you have so many vulnerabilities which you have given to others to exploit, to teach you about caste. Why is it that in the National Defense College, where selected brigadiers and air commodores and commodores from the Navy come to learn, the highest institute of learning in the Indian Armed Forces, why is the first lecture in the socio-economic series on caste? Why is it on caste? And why do we have to get some very well-known Indian personalities who have been educated in Harvard and other places to come and tell us about ourselves? Why do we have to go for social sciences to the West? Why? Why do we have to outsource our history to the West? These are some very seminal questions, and we better take a very hard look at our social media and how it is being used to weaken us, influence us, create narratives, supplant narratives, ram narratives down our throat, and make us a part of somebody else's narrative. This is a major, major threat that we are facing as a civilizational state. We are under constant attack. The Chinese have learnt and are doing it with great finesse. The Russians and the Chinese, they've been accused of trying to influence elections in the United States. You think your elections are not being influenced? Just take a look at the social media and you will get the shock of your lives. Take a look at what is happening on YouTube. In the garb of just analyzing your elections, what narratives are being peddled? Why has George Soros put $1 billion to attain certain electoral outcomes in India? Who the hell is he to dictate which government, which party will rule in India? What business, what right? Who gave him that God-given right to intervene here? $1 billion. That's all that it takes to buy people off here, buy journalists off here, use influencers on the social media to change narratives. It is a serious threat, ladies and gentlemen, and we must be very much alive to this threat, which could otherwise, like termites, eat us up from within. We may not face a foreign invasion from China or Pakistan or both, but without a shot fired, we may suddenly find ourselves splintering like the former Soviet Union into 15 states. Do we want that? If we don't, we'll have to wake up and smell the coffee. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. You have really pointed out the major issues which we need to be aware of. Certainly, we cannot outsource the history of our nation or the education system of our nation to the Western world. When today the plethora of Indian people can rule all organizations which are of worth their salt, including Microsoft and others, which proves that our education system is not bad at all. IITs are the proof, IIMs are the proof. Then why we need to outsource the education system in India to the foreign people is very important. Secondly, why we need to outsource our media to the Western world is again a question which need to be answered and tackled. There are plethora of organizations which are foreign funded, which are creating problems for us, which we need to be aware of to ensure that India remains united and we are not bifurcated and splintered like USSR. Thank you so much for your views, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, just to summarize, what we have seen in the opening session, Dr. Prabhu did enlighten us to make a distinction between the good NGOs which are doing a constructive work in India, but at the same time identify the organization which are doing everything in their might to destroy the fabric of our country on the caste lines or other lines. Therefore, we need to be very cautious and ensure that all these so-called NGOs are not disruptive, and also control the foreign funding which come to these, which are basically given to them to toe the lines of the people who are funding them. So that was a great learning. Similarly, Ambassador Sibal cautioned us that there are NGOs who are trying to do many disruptive activities. Do we need to outsource our media? Do we need to outsource education, like as he pointed out, liberal arts? Do we need to learn that from the foreign powers who will come in India and start teaching us arts here? It's a very serious question which we need to debate, and we also need to have our policies tailored to that. Last but not the least, General Bakshi really pointed out the dangers what we're going to face if we are not alive to what is happening. He was very right in pointing out that our election system is being doubted. The Election Commission on India is being painted in a black color, saying that it is most ineffective organization and it's a puppet. Therefore, it is time for us now to understand what is happening in India and to what level we must commend the civil organization and to what extent we must control them. So it is, we have now the path laid for us by these three eminent speakers. So it is for the others to deliberate on this, and it is for INDIC to come up with a very cogent recommendations to the powers that be, so that we are enabled policy wise and the resources wise to tackle this menace to keep our country intact. INDIC, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. I'm grateful. Thank you so much. Over to you, Joshi.
Thank you so much, Deshmukh sir, for chairing this session. My heartfelt gratitude to Dr. Suresh Prabhu, Ambassador Kanwal Sibal, and Major General G.D. Bakshi sir for providing a powerful start to our conference. With this, we have come to the end of our first inaugural session, and now I would request the audience to join us for the first session. Thank you so much.